March 11, 1985, Moscow, Kremlin. Mikhail Gorbachev stood alone for a moment before entering the Politburo chamber. He was 54 years old, younger than any Soviet leader in generations, and the weight pressing on his chest was not ambition but fear. Outside the Kremlin walls, the Soviet Union still looked eternal: red banners, military parades, nuclear missiles pointed west. Inside, it was already cracking. That morning, the men who ruled the largest country on earth would name him General Secretary. The empire he was inheriting stretched from East Berlin to Vladivostok, but its heart was exhausted. Factories ran on lies, not productivity. Citizens whispered instead of speaking. Coffins from Afghanistan returned quietly at night. The Soviet Union had won World War II, but 40 years later, it was losing time itself. Gorbachev knew something his predecessors had refused to admit: the system was no longer merely flawed. It was dying. From the very beginning, his decisions were shaped by memory. As a child in Stavropol during the famine years, he had watched neighbors disappear. As a young party man, he had seen brilliant engineers crushed by bureaucracy. And by 1985, he saw a terrifying truth: the Soviet Union could not survive another decade unchanged. The Cold War was bleeding the country dry. Military spending consumed the future. Oil prices had collapsed. Grain had to be imported from the West, an unthinkable humiliation for a superpower. Yet the most dangerous enemy was internal. The Soviet state functioned through fear and inertia. Truth itself had become subversive. Gorbachev chose reform not because he wanted to destroy the Soviet Union, but because he believed it was the only way to save it. By 1986, his words perestroika and glasnost echoed across the world. Restructuring and openness. To the West, they sounded hopeful. Inside the USSR, they sounded like an earthquake. For the first time, newspapers printed criticism. Political prisoners were released. And once truth was unleashed, it did not stop where Gorbachev hoped. On April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl reactor exploded. At first, the state did what it always did: it lied. But radioactive clouds do not respect censorship. As evidence spread across Europe, Gorbachev understood something fundamental: secrecy itself was now a threat to survival. The disaster hardened his belief that the Soviet system's greatest weakness was its refusal to confront reality. Still, reforms created consequences he could not fully control. Eastern Europe watched closely. When workers protested in Poland, Gorbachev refused to send tanks. When the Berlin Wall fell on November 9, 1989, the Red Army stayed in its barracks. For the first time since World War II, Moscow chose restraint over force. Some called it moral courage. Others called it betrayal. Inside the Soviet Union, nationalism surged. The Baltic states demanded independence. Ukraine questioned Moscow's authority. The Communist Party fractured into hardliners and reformers, each convinced the other would destroy the country. Gorbachev stood between them, increasingly isolated, trying to hold together a union that no longer believed in itself. By August 1991, the tension snapped. Hardliners launched a coup, placing Gorbachev under house arrest in Crimea. Tanks rolled into Moscow, but something had changed forever. The people did not submit. The army hesitated. Fear no longer worked. When the coup collapsed, so did the illusion of control. Power shifted to Boris Yeltsin. Republic after republic declared independence. Gorbachev could still command words, but not obedience. On December 25, 1991, in a quiet Kremlin office, Gorbachev recorded his resignation speech. He spoke calmly, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. The red flag was lowered for the last time. The Soviet Union ceased to exist. He did not surrender to the West. He did not intend collapse. He made a choice, again and again, to avoid mass bloodshed, to refuse civil war, to let history move forward without tanks in the streets. Whether he was right or wrong remains disputed. Millions lost stability, identity, and security. Others gained freedom they had never known. What is undeniable is this: the Soviet Union did not fall in a single night. It ended through decisions made by a man who believed that preserving human life mattered more than preserving an empire. And in that choice, history took a turn from which there was no return.